All right, my friends, we are back. A new year, Monday evening at 11:20 p.m. I've got COVID. I don't give a crap. I'm going to do a live stream with James Larson because he just went and did an incredibly exhaustive review of the new Paradigm Founders, the 100F and the 70 LCR. James, awesome to have you back. Appreciate you putting this much effort into this review. If I start sneezing or coughing or anything, you're going to have to kind of take the mic over for me if you don't mind.
Okay, that's fine. Sure. Okay. We could just go through the slideshow and we could just, talk about the speakers. So, we don't have to like talk too much, Gene. I can.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. This is a crazy world, but you know what? None of that crap's going to keep me down. I want to keep going. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video is some of the measurements, they look bad on paper, but they don't necessarily translate to bad sound. Very similar to when I measured the Yamaha receiver a couple of weeks ago, and I found all of these higher distortion than state of the art, I would say. And if you don't interpret the measurements carefully and understand what the measurements mean, you could get a wrong representation of a product and think the product is garbage. And that's part of the reason why I like to do this, these kind of live streams, because you can only discern so much from reading a review, looking at a graph. But when you talk to the people that have done the measurements and have done the listening tests like you have, it adds a layer of perspective that you can't get just by a binary answer, yes or no. So first, I want to let people know, excuse me, if you go on audioholics.com homepage right now, the Paradigm Founder 100F and 70 LCR full written review is online. It's 2 pages long. James, I don't even remember the word count, but it took me a while to get through that last night. It must have been about 7,000 or 8,000 words.
Yeah, it was like 8,500 words. Sorry about that.
You destroy me with your reviews, and I have to read every little word on that and put the pull quotes and all that other stuff. You are brutally descriptive, and I'm not saying it in a bad way. You just give me a lot of work, which is fine because this is what we're all about. So
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry about that. But
yeah,
just
I
trying
can't get my work done because I'm always peer reviewing everybody else's. But whatever, that's why we're here.
That's okay. Okay. Well, it's all about the published content in the end. Whatever makes the best article.
So the first thing I want to say, let me tell you guys, James Larson is the gold standard in loudspeaker reviews now. I don't even bother anymore. I just let him do all the measurements. He goes outside, sticks them on his little apparatus. He drops speakers sometimes, and we'll talk about that in a minute too. We got to get him working out. But the first thing I want to say is, this is a gorgeous looking speaker. I don't think you can really understand how pretty they are until you see them in person. The finish, and you'll talk about that in the review. But there's a lot going on in this speaker design. I mean, it's a pretty ambitious design for Paradigm, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I mean, this is a replacement to the Prestige speakers, and I think those were some of the biggest sellers for Paradigm. And
Appreciate the nice comment here from ABX Audiophile.
and yeah, so they tried to like take like so much of what they knew and like kind of push it forward to like a new like just advance what they had been doing so far, even forward more, and also use some new technologies that I haven't seen Paradigm use before. And
Right.
so it's their like their latest and greatest. Well, not the greatest is probably still the personas, but it's their latest. And then in some ways
Yeah.
they're doing some things that the personas aren't doing. They're pushing their technology forward a little bit more than the personas. But the
So one
personas,
thing that's interesting, you mentioned the Prestige series, and I had a chance to hear those on several occasions prior. And they were not my cup of tea in terms of the Paradigm family. I always felt like they were kind of a bright, more forward speaker. And then I heard the Premier 800Fs and the 500C, which I have now in the family room system of the Audioholics Smart House. That is literally the most neutral sounding Paradigm speaker I've ever heard. That speaker sounds a lot better than I anticipated. I know you gave that a glowing review 2-3 years ago now that I had to get some of those into my house, and you are dead on the money on that speaker, man. That's a little gem. People don't take it seriously enough because it's not that expensive. I think the pair of the 800Fs are like 2,000 a pair, and then the center channel is like $600. but they have good sensitivity. They have very neutral frequency response, good off axis response. And that little shower curtain thing on the mid range, I really think that does work because I just think those speakers image so great. And we see the shower curtain thing here. It's called a perforated, what the heck is it called again? The
I think
PPA lens.
yeah, the perforated phase a something lens. I don't.
I can never remember, man.
There's so it's a problem. One of the problems paradigms, they use so many acronyms and like
They have the art wedge. They have a lot
yeah,
of stuff going
so many
on.
like trademarked like names for things that are like it's hard to keep up with all of them. The PPA lens, though, I think it works. I've looked at the patents for like the PPA lens and like the art surround, right? And they
Yeah.
have actual data there, measurements that show a real difference between, you know, with and without. So like, so I think at least some of the things they're doing actually are shown to work in the patents. So this is not just pretty. It's not just for show. It has functional uses too.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah. So let's move on into the slide. Look at it. I mean, the speakers are just so the one thing about these speakers, yeah, they're a lot more expensive than the Premier 800Fs. They're, 4 or 5 times the price, 4.5 times the price. But the cabinetry alone, I mean, look at the workmanship, the finish,
Oh,
the
it's
outriggers.
gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice. I don't know. I don't, like you said, it looks better in person, especially this beautiful midnight cherry finish, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just, and that it had like this brush black aluminum front faceplate. The drivers all look really nice. The PPA lens looks cool, I think. It's
Yep.
just everything looks really good. The bass drivers with the art surround and that kind of like mixed woofer, like I don't know, texture. Like it's a really, really nice looking speaker. It's a kind of an expensive speaker, but it really does look like every penny that that it
I mean,
costs.
but expensive is relative because high end, you could spend 20 or 30 grand on speakers that have one driver. So, I mean, this has
Yeah,
3 7-inch woofers, a 6-inch mid range, the towers I'm talking about, a 1-inch waveguide tweeter. The things weigh about 72 pounds a piece. So, they're built pretty sturdy. They're
yeah.
42 inches tall, 13 inches wide, 16 inches deep. So they're pretty substantial size speaker, much bigger than the Premier 800Fs. The Premier 800Fs are kind of like the baby next to these.
They're not that much bigger. If I remember right, I don't think they're that much bigger, but they're definitely heavier and
Yeah.
they look nicer. Let's say if I just saw these at a trade show, I would think they'd probably cost a bit more than what they actually do. That's how nice they look.
So kudos on the cosmetics, kudos on the build quality. I like that little that line in the center or the center side panel. Kind of reminds me of like a car design, when they give it that kind of
Yeah,
aerodynamic look.
that's actually a brace that's to accommodate a diagonal brace that goes across the cabinet or on that crease or whatever angle, right?
Yeah.
And so it's also functional. It's not just to make the speaker look prettier. It's for cabinet
Oh,
reasons.
okay. Well, it looks cool. So let
Sure.
me go on to the next slide here. That's the center channel now. This is the 70 LCR.
It's more than just a center. It's an LCR. That means you can use it on its side. You
Right.
can use it as a stand mount speaker. So the LCR means, of course, left, center, right. And so you can have a front stage of these things really easy. So yeah, I was using it as a center, of course, and it'll probably mostly be used as center.
So just to give people perspective, I just looked at the dimensions on the Premier 800F versus the 100F, and they are about the same height. I'm surprised at seeing that, but the 100Fs are 3 inches wider and about 4 inches deeper, so more volume for sure.
Yeah, I have the 100 up right here if you can see
Yeah, let me
off to the
zoom in on
side.
you.
But like yeah, I can't lift it up and show it to you because it's a little heavy, right? It's a excruciatingly heavy actually, but yeah, so this is the guy right here. I really can't see much right now, but I have it. It's not a small speaker, and it's certainly not a light one. It's heavier, much heavier, and much more robust than the 800F.
Now, do the outriggers do they come already assembled, or you put those on?
You have to install those. Yeah,
Okay.
they don't come installed. I don't think hardly any speakers.
Focal does though. Focal has the outriggers already on when you pull them out of the box.
Okay,
At least on
yeah.
the Cantas, when we got the Cantas in.
Yeah, I would
It's
think that
all
on
one
the
piece.
Sopras, you would actually have to install them, maybe. I don't know. I've only reviewed
The
the Sopra
bookshelves.
bookshelves,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's a nice looking center too. You know, the one thing you'll note is that the mid-range driver is actually bigger than the mid-range driver is a coaxial driver.
Yeah.
So the tweeter is nested in the middle of the mid-range driver, and the mid-range driver, which is unusual for like well, almost any speaker, is actually larger in diameter than the bass drivers, which flank the mid-range driver.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, cool things about that, two things that are cool about that is it has a 2-inch voice coil, whereas the woofers have a 1.5 inch. Most coaxial drivers, I'm not a fan of coaxial for home theater because most of them lack the sensitivity. They lack the output. You look at some of the ELACs and they have like a 5-inch coaxial driver and a sensitivity of 86 dB. They just can't play very loud. This thing is 7 inches. You got more surface area. You have the ability to put a bigger motor structure on the tweeter. Now, on the regular tweeter on the towers, they use a ferrite motor structure, not a neodymium. Is the tweeter in this one a ferrite as well?
I don't know. I can't, like a lot of speakers when I do the review, I open them up to see what's going on.
Yeah, you can't really do that with
I
this.
can't do that with this kind of speaker, so I didn't get a look at the drivers. I just had to go with
But the
what.
bottom line is they must have used a 2-inch voice coil so they could put a bigger motor on the tweeter.
Yeah, it has a bigger. They made such a large mid-range driver for sensitivity reasons. They wanted the speaker to be able to handle high output, a lot of headroom, but I think it pays. It's not something that's for free. It's not a free lunch, and it pays for it elsewhere. But
Well,
we'll get into
also
that.
the cool thing is, and we'll get this into this in the measurements, but every time we always measure sensitivity on loudspeakers, and there's some brands that are more honest than others. And Paradigm always seems very conservative. Like you actually measured within a half a dB higher than their spec. So this speaker alone gets like 90, almost is it 89 or 90 dB sensitivity, which is really good for a an LCR.
It's in the neighborhood, but sensitivity is one of those things that it can the measurement can depend on the exact way you're measuring, right? So like I don't regard my sensitivity measurements as like some absolute truth, right? It's like, well, it's like almost like a ballpark thing, but close
Well, we
enough.
do it per the IEC from 300 hertz to 3 kilohertz. I mean, that's kind of what we hope everybody's following
Sure, but like
in free
the
space, not not 1/8 space like Klipsch.
no, yeah, I actually do it in half space, but then I like adjust it to free space. So like
Right.
I like knock off 6 dB. So yeah, and that's how I get my sensitivity measurements. And if I had actually done free space, I might get a closer match to what Paradigm is actually measuring. So
Yeah.
don't take my sensitivity measurements as like 1/10 of a dB gospel truth. That's
No, but
or
at least
anybody's for that
at
matter.
least you confirm the manufacturer spec.
Yeah, I'm just happy to get in the ballpark, right?
Yeah.
If that's in
So
the same ballpark as mine, I think we're on the same page and everything's good.
so this is the 70 LCR. They're $1,700 each, I
Yeah,
believe.
1700.
1,700 each. It's a three-way center channel. It doesn't have a WTMW because that mid-range is a coaxial, so it's a point source in the middle, flanked by 2 woofers for bass on the sides.
Yeah, it's I mean, you've seen this type of design in other speakers. I think Kef has centers
Mhm.
similar to this, and like maybe ELAC. Yeah, it's like it's a good way to solve the problem of the MTM, the so-called MTM center speaker designs, which have those huge like gulfs of like knolls off to the side.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good solution to a problem that happens with most center speakers. I think it brings about this particular coaxial brings about some problems, but I still think it's worth staying away from the penalties of traditional MTMs. And like we've it's kind of technical, but we've had articles, you can read
Yeah.
about that in our
Yeah.
reviews.
I mean, the alternative would have been to do a WTMW, but in order to keep that profile, it would be hard pressed to fit a 5-inch mid range with a 1-inch tweeter on top of it. Probably could. I mean, I guess that could be an alternative, but they just wanted to go this direction. Obviously, this is a new a lot of technology in this. It's not only just a coaxial, but it's a spherical waveguide in there as well, right?
Yeah, it's the waveguide. One thing they wanted to do was so they're using this waveguide in all of the Founder series, and like to keep the waveguide I don't matching with the rest of the Founders, like they had to actually make the cone of the mid-range driver the same shape as the waveguide. I don't think they quite did that. I think the waveguide has a kind of the shape of the cone has a little bit of a different shape, but I think they wanted to keep it kind of the same, and so they're using the mid-range driver as a waveguide as well as just a transducer. So
Yeah.
it's ambitious design.
Right, right. And it's important to note it's a first generation attempt at doing it on this series. So, assuming it's a commercial success, I would imagine that this could be trickling down into other series going forward.
Sure, yeah. I mean, these are just the specs, like of the towers, the 100Fs. Most of the stuff is just. Is there anything here that stands out?
It's interesting all the different materials they're using. They traditionally most paradigm tweeters are aluminum, but the better series had like a combination of aluminum, magnesium. I remember from like the SA25s, I had the in walls that were aluminum magnesium with a waveguide on them. Of course, they're very expensive speakers. Their Persona uses the beryllium driver.
Yeah.
Now this one uses aluminum, magnesium, and a ceramic dome. So
Well, I think the mid-range uses the aluminum, magnesium, ceramic,
Oh,
and
okay.
the tweeter uses just aluminum, a ceramic aluminum. I think it's just kind of a anodized aluminum,
Right.
So it's mostly just aluminum. So yeah, it's still basically aluminum with ceramic coating.
And then the woofer uses a carbon.
Yeah,
Like,
some kind of carbon. Yeah, they call it carbon X. It's a carbon mixture that it mixes the carbon with like some kind of like a material. I think it's like I can't remember.
I mean,
It's a lot.
you're seeing a lot of companies using that kind of cone material now, like the graphite cones and stuff. I
Yeah,
mean,
this mixes carbon with some other materials, and has
yeah,
these like it gives it this kind of like almost marbled look. So
yep.
like you'll have to refer to the review I say in the review what it's mixed with, but yeah, it's a mixture of different.
It kind of reminds me of, and this goes before your time, but back in the late '80s, Infinity they went from a plastic cone and then they went with a graphite injected cone in the 3001 series. When I looked at the woofer in this, it gave me those vibes.
Could
Just like,
well be similar, yeah, maybe.
yeah.
Sure. Yeah,
But
so
there's definitely more fancy materials in these speakers than in the Premiere series, and you could see the woofers look very, a lot more robust. So I'm imagining just looking at the power handling and the sensitivity rating doesn't give you the whole picture on how much potentially louder these speakers will play than the Premiere series.
yeah, there's for sure a headroom advantage in these over the Premieres. No, but the thing is, the Premieres I had pretty good headroom, so like
They
you
do.
want good speed that's louder. Well, here you go, right? And they look nicer. They have greater headroom, and
Yeah.
so yeah. So that we can go to the next page, which shows the one thing to note about the difference between the 100Fs. Like, okay, yeah, we went into how the 70 LCRs is using a coaxial bit driver, whereas the other speakers in the Founder series, except for their other center channel, the 90 center, they're just using just a regular waveguide, not a coaxial. So that's
Right.
something
The
just to keep in
towers
mind.
are using a traditional tweeter and a mid-range separate.
Sure, yeah. And so and it does produce different performance. It gives them a different performance profile. So like
Right.
yeah, I mean, and so this is like a lot of the same stuff. The ceramic, I make aluminum ceramic tweeter. The mid range is their aluminum, magnesium, whatever cone. Is it?
Right.
Okay, and then the same space drivers, except they're a little bit smaller than what you find in the towers. And so like these are sealed, whereas the towers are ported. The towers are down firing. They have a big down firing port, and these have a sealed
I mean, it kind of does make sense to seal a center channel because most people are going to put them on top of a credenza, or they might even put it inside of its own cabinet under the TV.
and they'll
And
get a
having
lot
those,
of, yeah, they'll get a lot of boundary gain from that.
you're going to plug those ports anyway, and you're going to base manage your center channel in most cases. So I don't see it as a problem that they did the center channel as a seal. Plus, it meets the THX requirement, as you showed in your review, the 12 dB per octave roll off, acoustical roll off. And then when you add the filter on top of that for bass management, you get the 24 dB per octave integration with your subs.
Yeah, you don't even need, yeah, like these have a really good, I think, wasn't the THX spec for the crossover a second order roll off on the
Yeah.
speaker and a first,
Yep.
no,
Second order acoustic and then second order electric.
okay, yeah. So you don't need, I mean, you could just put these in a subwoofer system, and if you had no way of bass managing, or I mean, high pass filtering
They
the
kind of self
speakers.
high pass themselves.
Yeah, they high pass themselves. You could just the subwoofers, if the subwoofer's low pass filter behaves correctly, they're intrinsically bass managed. The system could be intrinsically bass managed, you know. So that's
Yeah.
kind of neat. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So go on to the next slide. This shows a cross section. My picture of the tweeter and a cross section of the tweeter. The tweeter has that PPA lens on it,
Yep.
on a smaller scale, and
it's like a phase plug, basically, right? You want to just explain exactly what it does?
Yeah. So if you look at take a close look at the PPA, that kind of patterned, like almost grill looking thing on the tweeter's dome. The outer holes are bigger than the inner holes, and this is done so that the parts, all the sides of the tweeter of the dome don't conflict with each other, or they don't like come in. The waves, the sound that's spread out from them aren't like colliding with each other and causing like cancellation.
Interference,
Yeah, comb filtering or whatever, right? And so this helps to prevent that. So like,
Yep.
I go into it. I'm more articulated about it in the review itself. So if you really want to know more, just refer to the review.
Yeah, we've covered this technology in the Premiere series as well as the Persona series. So
This is not
there's
new.
a ton of information on prior reviews on audioholics.com if you guys want to learn more about that.
And if you really want to look up more, just look up the patent for it. So you can look up the patent on the Google patents, and it tells you all about it, right?
Yep.
Same thing with this, the mid-range, nice beefy magnet on it.
And let me tell you, I know people when they first saw that lens cap, I remember hearing a lot of different comments in the press. People said it looks like a gimmick or whatever. But first of all, we know it works because these speakers sound great. But secondly, I think they're gorgeous. Even on the Premiere 800Fs, when I come into the living room and people come over and they see, like, they're always asking, what is that on the speaker? And I'm like, well, it does, all this cool stuff. Like, so it's a phase plug. It gets rid of common frequencies from colliding and causing acoustical interference, but it also looks cool and it protects the driver. And the advantage of this lens on a mid-range as opposed to a phase plug driver, phase plugs typically, one advantage of a phase plug is it reduces the cone mass a little bit because you don't have the dust cap, but you could get turbulence through a phase plug. And I've heard that on many two-way speakers that have a phase plug woofer and a tweeter, and you start cranking it up, and when the air flows through that phase plug, you could hear turbulence. You don't get that with a PPA lens.
Sure, yeah, the PPA lens. I mean, even if it did nothing, I think it's a cool. It's fine as a grill, right? It's protective. It's a metal grill. You can't you could hit the speaker. Your hand wouldn't go through this unless you hit it really, really hard.
It reminds me of when I was a kid and you had the Play-Doh machines and you would run the Play-Doh through the different shapes.
Yeah, so and also it's a good look. It's a distinctive look. So now it's good for branding, for like Paradigm's branding. So if you see this PPA lens, you see, oh, that's a Paradigm speaker, So it's just looks nice, and it seems to work well. So yeah, it's nice.
Yep.
I don't know what to say. Yeah. Here's the bass driver. You can see that texture, right? Do you see the streaks on the cone, right? So that's like this. There's some kind of mixture going on. It's not like a carbon something.
It's
blend, right?
Pretty striking.
Then there's the art surround, that dimpled surround. Paradigm says that gives the speaker an extra 3 dB of
3
headroom.
dB, right? Yeah.
I've never fully believed that because 3 dB is a lot, right?
That is a lot.
I think it might be true maybe at a certain frequency range, right? but I don't know. It still looks cool, and if it helps, that's better. All the better for it.
I mean, the driver looks like it has a long throw. Look at how long the voice coil is on it. So it
Yeah,
looks like
and the you can see the gap underneath the former, right? There's a nice healthy amount of throw, so this speaker would have a lot of flex, before it actually ran into any kind of like
yeah, and again, you don't get that with the Premier 800s. You just don't. I mean, that they have limits in the amount of SPL that they could generate, where this speaker obviously has a dynamic advantage, which could come in handy if you're running them full range or if you're in a larger room. They also have a model above this, the 120H, I believe, which
Yeah,
has the woofers below are all active. So, and they give you like 1,000-watt amplifier per speaker. So you got active bass control if you want, and with arc. So you could
yeah,
do the room correction in the speaker. So that's if you want a true full range speaker without using subs and it's a 2-channel system, then I would say, you know what, you might want to consider the 120Hs. But if you're integrating this into a home theater and you already have active subs, this speaker is the more economical choice.
yeah. You mean that I don't see that the 120 would have a lot more. They might have a little bit more mid bass headroom depending on how much power you're feeding these.
Yeah,
But like, yeah, so like I don't know. I would go with these if you were just using subs, Like I mean, listen, unless you really want a lot of mid bass, then
right.
it's the case for the 120Hs. Sure, we can go to the next slide.
Let's see where we're at.
Sure. So I don't have like a schematic, like a diagram of the coaxial driver. I'll just go through what Paradigm says about it. The the founder's new coaxial mid-range driver found on the center channel models employ OSWs, which means oblate spheroid waveguides. Oh, they just say they oblate spheroid shape with coaxial mounted tweeter. Um, they say it maintains detail and sonic focus within the broad and deep soundstage by acting as a waveguide with tweeter, making its dispersion characteristics ideal for any listening space. Our patented dual sync continuous flux motor. There's Paradigms, their marketing kind of like literature, their wordage in there, has taken away the limitations of combining magnet structures as well as having a full-size low distortion and a higher output mid-range tweeter combination while maintaining a relatively low height for the center. Well, I mean, of course, the reason why they made this coaxial is so that they could have a high output mid-range,
Yeah,
um,
and low
without having,
profile.
yeah, low profile. And so what they say here that one of the problems mid-ranges can have, or coaxial drivers can have, is like you have two motor structures, right? You have the mid-range magnet motor structure and the tweeter motor structure, and sometimes they can like cause problems with each other, right? So Paradigm says they have some thing their trademark dual sync continuous flex motor. I don't know what it does, and Paradigm doesn't say what it does. And like, this is kind of a shame. On some of their other technologies they have, they say, well, here's what it actually does. On this thing, that
Yeah,
they don't see how it operates at all. And so,
yeah.
but they say they found a way to have the motor structures not interfere with each other. And so I guess,
Well,
you know,
maybe we'll have them on in the future, and they can with one of the engineers, and we can talk about transducers. I wanted to bring up. I was looking at the specs on the 120H a little bit more. So that's a substantially more expensive speaker. It goes from $2,600 each to $4,200 to the 120H, but it drops your 3 dB point or your 2 dB point from 42 hertz down to 22 hertz. So they're doing some EQ correction, and you also get a little bit bigger bass drivers. They go from the 6-inch or the 7-inch to the 8-inch. So you are getting a substantially more bass capable speaker in the 120H. And again, if you're just doing a 2-channel system, that makes more sense to you. But in a home theater environment, I really think the 100Fs combine it with like the 90C or their 70 LCR is probably the way to go for most people.
the 120Hs might not be as EQ. It might not have need as much EQ as you would think for that negative 3 dB point, because it has a lot to do with the cabinet volume and the port too. The port for the
Mhm.
100F isn't very. It's pretty wide and it's not very deep, right? And so that would have kind of a higher resonant frequency. It depends on how you tune the speaker and how much output the port is producing. So a lot of the port has to do with what that point to. But they could be EQing. I mean, I don't know. But
Yeah, well, it's a bigger speaker too. That's a good point. So the port's probably longer, and there's a whole host of other things.
sure, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, here, there's the port. This is the bottom mounted port. You know, it's pretty good
Flared,
sized port. Yeah, it's
screwed
flared.
in. I'm surprised. I wonder if that's just the face of the port. I wonder if they glued the port in and then they screwed on the cover or something.
I would think there's something. There's a seal there for sure, some kind of gasket, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the speakers have a really high build quality. There's the feet.
Yep.
Man, those things are sharp. Spikes, right? You don't have to use them, but they're sharp. So be
Yep.
careful, right, with those spikes. And you might want to use them to elevate, because this is a downfiring speaker. You can use the kind of a rubbery thing that's underneath the spikes if you don't screw in the spikes, but it doesn't give a lot of clearance to the port. So these speakers are kind of intended to be used with the spikes, and the spikes are very sharp.
So there's a couple of advantages to having the port down firing like that, as opposed to having it in the front or the back of the speaker. And some of this is my experience and what I've observed with subwoofers that do this. Number one, having the port on the floor like that acts as a low pass filter. So if there's any kind of chuffing, you're less likely to hear it just because of the orientation of the port. Number two, you can put the speaker closer to a back wall because there's no loading from the port behind the speaker.
Oh, it'll still load, depending on
Yeah,
the distance.
differently though. It's more
Yeah.
forgiving.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I also think you get better coupling. I felt like I've listened to subwoofers that put the port on the bottom. In fact, one of the Dynamos or one of the Mart Logan subs has it so you can orient this so the port is firing out or is firing down. And anytime I set up one where the port was firing down, I hope this isn't expectation bias, James, but I think it's loading, it's coupling the base, it's giving more port output because it's closer to the ground.
It might be what it might be doing. I mean, I think that it could be just so if you like make the port bigger or longer, right, you're actually going to lower the tuning frequency of the port, so it might give you like a little bit deeper bass. I don't think it's getting you more output, but deeper bass rather, or just like
Yeah.
more bass at a lower frequency, you know. So it'll sound different for sure.
I commend them for doing something like that. I think that's another thing that they're doing that's different from what they've done in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
The
And
other
then they
okay, yeah, the other picture there with that like screw and that blue thing. With that
yeah,
blue
you
thing.
like that.
No, I didn't.
You
No,
love that. You've
I
been
was
talking about
skeptical
that
of it.
for a year.
Yeah, ever since they actually announced this, I was like, "What? That doesn't make any sense."
You
And
give them too hard of a time about this, man. It's a mechanical decoupler.
it doesn't. I don't. Okay. If for those who haven't read the review, I don't. Okay. Yeah, this is a mechanical decoupler. What it does is so the frame of the woofer is mounted to the cabinet. Well, what Paradigm has done here is they've given the mounting between the cabinet and the driver like a dampening thing that like so the driver doesn't vibrate the cabinet.
Yeah, I mean, but you normally put a gasket ring around a driver before you put it on the box anyway. It's doing that, but it's on steroids.
The gasket is just to make a seal. It's not really really there to absorb vibrations.
I
And
thought
like
okay.
and like so like this there's no you want okay my question is why would you want the cabinet not to like take those vibrations from the driver? The cabinet's supposed to take the motion of the drivers and like use just sheer mass to make the whole thing not resonate, right? You
Yeah.
don't I don't see the sense in decoupling the cabinet from the driver's motion because you
Because
still have the
some
motion.
mechanical engineer at Paradigm said, dude, I came up with this really cool screw that decouples things. Let me put it on the product. Okay. When I worked as an engineer at a telecom company, I came up with this circuit that would let a little light go off on a modem to let people know that their power was going out. They didn't need that little light. I wanted to put it in there because I used a really cool FET trick with a discharge capacitor, and they let me put it in. So give the mechanical engineer some kudos for coming up with this decoupling fastener to put it on the woofer. maybe it does something if you get a laser vibrometer, or we could somehow measure the vibrations of the cabinet.
Even if you
Maybe it's
did
doing
though, what's the acoustic consequence of that? How does it help the sound, right? Even if there was some kind of like, is that does the transmission of the vibrations, is it producing any serious sound? I think in a cabinet,
maybe also be from an assembly standpoint, there's less failures when maybe this thing is added more structural integrity when the way they're inserting the woofers.
uh,
A lot of well, you laugh, but a lot of times when you get a very heavy, massive woofer and they don't use good threaded inserts,
sure, I can tear the.
if you those screws strip so easily,
Sure,
okay?
and yeah, these are heavy duty drivers, so yeah, I mean, I think this might make it weaker. I don't know. I don't see that. I don't know. If people can judge for themselves, I don't know if Paradigm is not gonna. I don't think they're gonna say too much about it, right? So
It's interesting they show glue on that, so it looks like they don't want it ever removed.
yeah, I don't think this is coming off easy. Uh, it's just I don't. I all I can say is I'm very skeptical about the whatever advantage this has, and
You're too pragmatic, James.
it does. I don't think it's hurting anything. So
No.
I don't know. I'm not. It doesn't bother me too much. So I don't think it's hurting anything. I just don't think
It
it.
bothers you because you keep talking about it.
Yeah, I know. I'm obsessed.
Dude, I've never seen someone talk more about a screw on a speaker than you.
Well, it's the details, right? I mean,
Devil's
you
in the
get in the nitty
details, yeah,
gritty. But I guess we can move on to the next slide, so I don't just carry on. Okay, so
yeah.
now we're getting to the measurements. Like here's the measurement conditions that I measured the speaker in.
Is this the one you dropped?
Yeah, no, I didn't drop it. I just banged it on the side of a wall. I didn't drop it.
Oh, okay.
So if I dropped it, that would have been a lot worse. No, the corner is chipped just a little bit. I'm sorry, Gene, but it's not easy to see unless you went to the back of the speaker. I
I'll
just
get a
like,
black magic marker, and that's the best trick you can do to make it
yeah, it'll
invisible.
like disappear. I mean, yeah. So like here's the anechoic or the quasi anechoic conditions.
You got some beautiful backyard, man. God, that's look at those trees.
Yeah, that's a nice. This is kind of this little slight older neighborhood. Nice old trees. We had a nice tree. I had to have it cut down. Darn it. And that was on the other side of the speaker, on the right side.
Right.
You've seen in older pictures probably of me, but we cut it down, and that was nice. It gave me a lot of shade when I was actually measuring speakers, but
Oh,
it had to
man.
go. It had to go. So yeah. Anyways, yeah. So there's the microphone, that rod that comes down from the upper left-hand corner, right? That's the microphone, and 2 meters away, and you just measure the speaker, and so you can go to the speaker's elevated at like the mic and the tweeter are set somewhere around like a 7.5 to 8 foot height.
So, guys, give some love to James for going outside, creating this apparatus, hoisting up a 72-pound speaker on it, setting up the mic, spending an afternoon just doing all these measurements for us. There's very few people in our industry that are doing this kind of detail of work, and it's a kind of a dying art, and we need to keep it going. And James, I can't tell you how much I really appreciate you doing this kind of stuff for us. So I just want people to really understand that this is pretty intensive work to do all these measurements, capture it accurately and consistently, and then go write up a report on it and then interpret what you measured too.
Yeah, it's not easy lugging that 70+ pound speaker up a ladder, and it's not too hard. 70 pounds isn't that bad, but when you want to be super careful with the speaker that's just as beautiful as this, like when I
Yeah.
put that dent in, I was like, I was angry with myself. It's like such a beautiful speaker, right? And like it's hard to, it's easy to carry 70 pounds, but it's hard when you don't want a
No,
single
man,
scuff on it.
it's obscure weight. It's not like it's got handles or anything like that.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah,
like you're taking a 70-pound dumbbell and throwing it up there. It's much different.
yeah, it's not just 70 pounds, it's keeping it safe, and
Yeah.
pristine.
Good thing you didn't have to do that with the Paralisten.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, no, yeah, that would, I wouldn't be able to. I couldn't do that with the
So
Philips.
someone's asking, have your neighbors ever seen you do this?
Yes, they have, and they've asked, "What are you doing?" Yeah, that have had that happen. Yeah, and like I just explained to them.
Do they ever offer help, or do they just ask you what the hell you're doing?
Oh, they just asked me what I'm doing. Nobody's offered to help. No, I no, that I can manage. So and like so it's fine.
Got a shout out here from Aaron. Aaron's another one. He's a trooper that goes and measures. He's got a really expensive system that,
He used to do it outside. He used to do the same thing I did, and
yeah,
he knows the pain involved. So now he's got his fancy clip machine. So
he's got a Clipple. Yeah,
yeah,
we can't all be Aaron. Aaron's rocking it,
but
man.
Aaron actually used to do the same thing that I was doing here. So like he knows. A few other people know the pain that he does.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, we can go on to the measurements, I guess.
You know what? I lost where they are. There it is. Okay.
Here's like a 3D view of the dispersion on an off-axis dispersion, and it's pretty nice and uniform, right? There's some little bit of ripples on the off-axis response, but that's not like audibly
So
consequential.
yeah, so that 15 kilohertz ripple you're seeing, I mean, usually you see that when there's a phase plug on a tweeter. You think it's something like that, or it's not a breakup mode?
It's not a breakup mode. I don't know. It's probably a consequence of the waveguide.
Oh, okay,
It might be a
yeah,
consequence for the waveguide in combination with that lens, the PPA lens.
right.
But like it's not. It's 15 kilohertz, and
It's very high Q too.
yeah, you're not going to hear that. That sounds like nothing. It's
Yeah,
not what you really want to look at is stuff like below that, like maybe 11, 12 kilohertz and below is the stuff that really matters. 15. I would say 15 to 20 kilohertz doesn't really matter for me too much. Like there's speakers with all kinds of weird flaws up there that I don't
yep.
care about.
I
You're not
can't
going
even
to hear
hear.
it.
I can't even hear above 15 kilohertz anymore. So
Yeah, I bet you most of the readership has
yep.
very insensitive hearing at that range. So, but when they're within the range that is audible, we get a nice flat response and also a very nice off-axis response that has a good correlation to the
So
on-axis.
there is a little bit of a treble tilt on the speaker.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, and it might sound a little airy. It's not going to sound hot or forward, right? Because the treble tilt happens kind of in a high frequency, like 10 kilohertz and above, right? It might
Yep.
sound a little bit more like airy, right? But if you want a hot speaker, you put that treble tilt at like say 6 kilohertz, 8 kilohertz, right?
Yeah.
Then that starts making the speaker sound like spicy, or like hot. It's like a little bit aggressive. This is
But
not an aggressive
in
sounding speaker.
comparison to the premieres were flatter at the higher frequencies than this.
Yeah, I'm gonna say well, yeah, they were flatter. Yeah, they didn't have the waveguide anomalies that this is having. So, yeah, but they were a flat speaker too. This is mostly a flat. They'll sound pretty similar, not identical, but similar, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie, this looks very phallic, James. I don't know what you're doing with these pictures here.
This is not that. I've had pictures that look more phallic. This one is not. This thing looks almost like a
The hell is
big
this, Predator?
Japanese temple. If you ask me,
It
like,
does.
yeah, like yeah. So what the thing that like okay, obviously the darker colors mean lower amplitude, hotter colors like that dark red, higher amplitude. The thing to look for is how even everything is like on the horizontal line, right? So like if you got a lot of evenness horizontally with those colors, the colors follow horizontal lines or horizontal striations, right? The better it is, the better off-axis, the more consistent off-axis response there is. And this is very good. It's not perfect, but it's very good. It
Mhm.
means that the waveguide is really doing its job right, and the crossover is doing its job. So there's not any kind of like bad directivity, like mismatches between any of the
Right.
drivers, right? So it's just good news here, right? Not
Th-
perfect, but very
th-
good.
This is funny because I love 80s games. Yours Revenge from Atari. That was like the best Atari game. That was way ahead of all the other games that they were making at the time. Good analogy there, man. Appreciate that. I used to
Yeah.
play that game like crazy.
Yeah, I played the 2600, but I didn't play that game. So we can go to the next slide. This is I can't get okay. This is oh no, I didn't take vertical measurements of this. This is horizontal measurements. Okay, so those bluish graphs, they show the dispersion, but it's hard. If you look closely, you can see how the angles are. But if you don't want to look at those, go through those graphs with the magnifying glass, I should kind of show you what angles have the most neutral response here. So it's
Yeah,
0.
it's 20
So,
degrees really.
so yeah, I'm going to say 20 to 10 degrees is where you're going to get the most neutral response. So if you really want the best like direct sound from the speaker, listen to them somewhere at 10 to 20 degrees, and that's really the angle.
Which is really, if you don't toe it in much and you're sitting in the sweet spot, you're at about probably
20
10,
degrees,
20 degrees
maybe
anyway.
25, yeah, somewhere around
Yeah.
there. So, but
So in other words, you don't really need to toe the speaker in.
yeah, I wouldn't toe these. I would give them a slight toe in, not right, not to have them facing toward you directly, but
Yeah.
kind of like almost angled toward your position, but not directly your
Would
position.
you consider these, based on the measurements, would you consider these more of a narrow dispersion speaker?
More narrower. I wouldn't consider these a narrow dispersion speaker, but narrower than most speakers. So I guess narrow, kind of narrow, kind of
So they
narrow.
don't do the time intensity trading thing that Matt talks about with the Geddes speaker?
There's I forgot what angle. You could probably do that with these. I'd have to look closely at the polar responses for that, but I think you could do that with these because it maintains that the angle, like the dispersion pattern, that pretty low to a pretty low frequency, and that's what you want. So I think these could kind of do that.
What we're talking about is when you have a more narrow dispersion speaker, you could use toe-in tricks, putting them further apart, and you can get a wider sweet spot with them, because
Yeah,
as you get closer to one speaker, the other one gets quieter on.
you guys went into a live stream about that. That went into pretty hard. It's kind of complicated how to do that and why it works, right? But you should just tell people go look at maybe link to the live stream in the description, right? And just go. You guys can refer to that because it's complicated, right?
We have like a 2 or 3 part video series on that, but
Yeah, it's a good one. It's well worth watching for those who haven't
yeah.
already seen it. Yeah.
Anyway, so we'll move on.
Here's
So
low.
now here's the thing that I really wanted to talk about in the live stream, because people look at this graph and they're like, this speaker doesn't have a whole lot of bass. But the one challenge on any time you measure a large tower speaker is it's very difficult to get an accurate bass measurement of what that speaker can do. Back in the day, I used to use LMS, and I would measure each driver separately, and I would sum the port, and I would use tricky math to try to get an approximation of the frequency response. Mixed results. I know Matt probably is way more successful at doing that than I ever was. But then you could do ground plane. But if you go to do ground plane with 3 woofers and a port that's firing down, and you turn the speaker sideways, first of all, I don't think you're going to get the full contribution of the port
You're not.
regardless.
Yeah, you're not.
And then you got to have the microphone a good 3 or 4 meters away. And at that point, you're dealing with the noise floor of the outdoors,
The
or
noise
you're
floor
dealing
isn't a
with being
big
too
deal. The noise floor is not a big deal. Well, I mean, it can be if you're not, but like it's not the noise floor that's a problem. It's like
interference of boundaries.
boundary interference, yes, and that's not even that big of a deal. But it's like now you have to if you're I do this in a residential neighborhood. I do this in my driveway, and like if I were to do this at like say longer than say 4 meters, 6 meters, and that
Yeah.
would really better capture all the the output of the drivers together, right, and the port. I would have to have it so loud that I would really be a nuisance, and I don't want to do that. So like I do this at 2 meters, and I think I'm getting a pretty good I don't get the full port contribution at that, but I think
But
I'm
it's
getting
interesting because the slope is 12 dB per octave. I mean, it's like it almost looks like it's a sealed design.
a lot of loudspeaker manufacturers tune their tower speakers to have like a shallow roll off. It might roll off sooner than you'd expect and on a higher frequency, but it has a shallow roll off that's designed to play with like boundary gain and room and like pressure vessel gain that boosts the low frequencies, right? So
Right.
if you had a speaker that measured like flat to say 30 hertz and you put it right against the wall, you would get a lot of bass boost, right? And it wouldn't sound. I've had speakers like that, like those Klipsch RP 8000 Fs, right? Had a
Yeah.
pretty flat response down to like 40 hertz, but they had some hot bass for that
Yeah.
reason, right? It was a very bass heavy speaker.
Yeah.
This it should sound fine if you play some near a wall, right? It'll probably sound pretty even. It'll even out in room, So this is an underdamped response, and or is it overdamped? This is overdamped, not underdamped. This is overdamped,
Overdamped. Yeah.
and in room you'll have more usable bass down to a lower frequency than what this shows.
I know you probably will or say this is subjective, but I tend to find speakers that have an overdamp response, they sound a little bit tighter. They can sound tighter. If they have enough headroom, you can EQ and add some more bass back to it, and you could still have the benefit of having a controlled response that doesn't have too much boundary gain in a room. It won't sound bloated, and you have the ability to EQ it and add a little bit more bass to it. So I would imagine this could be a very musical sounding bass coming out of these towers if you put a little boost on them, if you need a little
You could
boost.
put a boost on them because those are 7 hot, pretty nice excursion 7-inch drivers, right? So this
Yeah.
has the displacement. So yeah, you could put a boost on
So to
this.
put things into perspective, guys, we did that JTR video at my house, Matthew Pose and Don Dunn. Those subwoofers, I think the 3dB point of that sub, you have one of them, is a sealed 18-inch sub. I think it was rolling off at like 30 hertz when you measured it ground plane, but I was getting single digit extension in my room because it's a sealed design. It has a shallow roll off. It has EQ processing, and the X max on that driver is like 36 millimeters. So you could boost the snot out of it. And that thing was like shaking my spinal column. But if you went with just this one ground plane measurement like we're doing here, you would think that sub doesn't have a lot of bass. You would think the speaker doesn't have a lot of bass.
Yeah, in room it's a different story. You
In
know,
room is a different story. And when you have the hardware with the ability to boost without causing compression, you can do a lot with that.
you can't. I don't think this needs a hardware. When you put these in a room, especially if you put like a corner, right? It's gonna have bass. These have bass. Like in my listening, right? You put them anywhere near a wall or a surface, and the bass really comes out. So it's
Yeah, and I think Paradigm says the 2 dB points in the 40s, like 42 hertz. And I think you said in your review that it's very conceivable in real rooms you get usable bass extension down to the low 40s.
you're definitely gonna get the bass extension to the low 40s with a shallow roll off like this. Absolutely, you would. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, you can go to the next graph. This is just the Grille effects. The Grille doesn't do a whole lot to like damage or like help the sound, right?
So
It
the
changes
Grille
the
is the
sound.
red color, right?
Yes, the Grille is the red color, and it just, you can see the diffraction makes it a little bit, the sound a little bit more jagged into the high frequencies, right? But you're not going to hear that. The Grille doesn't really hurt the sound. It doesn't really help it.
Yeah, but you know what? You got your rocking speakers that look like this. Keep those damn grills off, unless you have kids running around, or those drivers are beautiful.
Yeah, don't put the grills on if you don't
Yeah.
need to. The speakers look nice, much better without the grills. So like all this shows the effects of the grills. It's
Yeah.
not terrible. Yeah. So,
Are the grills? Stupid question for you, but are the grills a really thin frame or are they thick? Because thick frame grills tend to have more diffraction off axis than the really thin ones.
I think these are thin framed ones. I think these are thin framed.
There's a lot of science that goes behind grill design. People probably don't realize, but at the end of the day, I tell them usually keep the grill off.
Yeah, keep the grill off. I've measured a few speakers where measured better with the grill on, but
That probably means that
very few.
they probably made them too bright to begin with.
Or they just were made to be used with the grill, you know. So yeah.
So here you got the Founder LCR doing the measurements on that. Now the interesting thing about this is you would think it should measure pretty similar whether it's in a vertical or horizontal orientation. But in fact, it's different. It would be that way if it was just one driver. But the fact that you have those two other bass drivers changes how the speaker performs, whether you do it whether you use it vertically or horizontally, right?
It does. It doesn't change it a huge amount, but it does change the performance depending on how you use it. Yeah, it's like it's mostly a match, but not as nearly as much as obviously if you had just a coaxial driver, it wouldn't make a difference if you used it in horizontal or vertical. Well, it would make a slight difference depending on the dimensions of the front baffle, but not too much. This a little bit more difference because you have now these bass drivers
Right.
that affect the dispersion, you know, of on the plane that they're mounted in.
So the difference, I was just looking at the specs. The LCR, the 70 LCR is a 4-driver, 3-way sealed enclosure. The 90C is basically the same thing with 2 more passive radiators.
Yeah, the 90C, it's an interesting design. The 90C is if you want a little bit more bass headroom, the 90C is the one to get.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you're gonna, I mean, there might be a case for it. if you want the headroom or if you want lower extension. But really, the LCR is going to give you basically like 90% of what the
Right.
90C is going to give you. So
And the LCR is smaller, so if you're putting it horizontally below a TV, it makes more sense. If you're putting these speakers behind a perforated screen, then I guess go all at it, get the 90s and put all three of them vertical, and you
vertically,
get
yeah.
yeah.
It wouldn't make a difference, yeah. Put them vertically, but 90s, yeah. These speakers are like, we should like we said, it can be used either vertically or horizontally.
So what's the orientation now on this measurement, and also why does this graph look different than the other graphs we were looking at?
Okay, so this is the speaker and this measured in its horizontal orientation. It would be a different in the vertical, but not that much. I've
Uh-huh.
done that measurements for comparing else like MTM and other types of centers, vertical versus horizontal. How does it change a CTA 2034? It doesn't change that much. It changes the listening window curve a little bit. So okay, so this is the so-called spinorama graph, and this shows I can do a lot more measurements with speakers that are smaller, right? Because in order to produce this graph, you have to measure the entire circumference of both the horizontal and vertical axes of the speaker, right?
Right.
So I can't, if I were to do that with the 100H, I would have to put it on its side and turn it by its tweeter, right, on the tweeter axis, and I'd have to rotate it all around the full 360, right? Can't do that with the tower speaker, but this I can do it with. And so this shows it's a summary of all of those, the entire this output, the frequency response. It's shooting out at all angles. That's like there's the on-axis angle. There's the stuff that's near on-axis, which is the red line, and there's the stuff that's kind of just like the whole front hemisphere. That's the black line underneath the red line. And this is like a shorthand what I'm doing. And then the green line is what the response of the tweeter at all angles, the whole spherical response of the speaker. And the dashed lines down there they show you how directional the speaker is, what the response of the directionality. Those are called directivity indexes. And we have
Right.
articles that I explain this kind of like step by step for people who don't really understand this graph. It's a complicated graph, and so we can refer to that article, the understanding loudspeaker measurements articles that I wrote, I don't know, a
Yep.
couple of years ago, right? And that goes
It's
into,
in the review. If you go into the review on audioholics.com, we put links to all the measurements and what all that stuff means.
yeah. So it's a lot. It's complicated. Just go to the review if you really want to know. These graphs are being used more and more nowadays, and they show a lot. They tell you a lot. There's a summary of the speakers. And
That notch that's like it looks like it's at about 4.2 kilohertz.
yeah, there's a notch there. You know what? That's not a big deal.
It's pretty high Q.
High Q, yeah. That's the first thing probably when people look at this graph. That's
It
what they're
looks
going to
bad
see.
on first look. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's a flaw. There's no doubt it's a flaw. But it's not really all that audible, the flaw.
But
This is not
that could be fixed though. Like if they come out with a second gen product, they
yeah,
could reshape the waveguide or maybe change the crossover point or something. They could probably get that better, right?
yeah. Oh, for sure. I think so. It can't be fixed via equalization though. So don't think that your room correction equalization is going to fix that. It's not.
So what would Odyssey do with something like that? Would it try to boost that notch?
I think so. Yes, it would try to boost a notch, and it would.
So you
It
got to
might
really
work.
be careful with auto EQ because auto EQ could boost that thing 9 dB.
Yeah, it's hard to say what it would do. It depends on the room and the acoustic circumstances, and it's not worth. It's an error that's not really worth taking any like major steps to compensate for, right? If you ask me if there's an error in this graph, I mean it's not perfect, but a more significant error and probably less visible is see how there's kind of at around 2 kilohertz, there's there's also a dip, but it's much more wider, right? You see how
Yeah.
there's like a slope going from 1.5K to 2 kilohertz, right? That's going to have a lot more effect on the sound character of the speaker than that notch at 4 kilohertz.
Interesting.
That's gonna have a much greater effect on the sound character. And like in my own listening, though, I mean, I listen to the speaker. I watched some movies with it, some TV shows, and it didn't sound bad. I mean, I didn't. It's
Well, I hope
all
it
the
sounded good for
it sounded
1700.
it sounded fine. All the dialogue was intelligible, and the music that came through the center was fine. The effects of movies came through fine. It sounded fine, right? So while this is a flawed graph, the reality is the sound isn't as bad as this graph looks, and this is not even that bad of a graph if you know what to
Now,
look for.
would you say that the treble is a little more forward on the speaker than the 100F, because it looks like there's more energy in the high frequencies?
I don't think I'd say that, because if you look at the high frequency energy, it's mostly on the level. I mean, the speaker is probably a little scooped out from say 2 kilohertz to like say 5 or 6 kilohertz, right? It's a
Yeah,
little bit, it's a bit recessed there, and that's the I guess overall gist of this is that it's going to be a little more recessed in the mid ranges and also lower treble. But I didn't. No, it's not going to sound hot. That wasn't my experience. But your mileage may vary. That was me. You could have a completely different experience. So yeah, that's the and like I said, because if you look at the directivity indexes, you'll see that they're kind of they're not exactly flat lines. It's not exactly neutral down there. That means it's going to be hard to equalize these speakers if you want a predictable sound.
right.
It's that means that kind of tells you how well you can equalize them with predictable results. And these, yeah, it might be a little bit tougher. Like I said though, I don't think they sounded bad. So you have to listen for yourself. So here's the horizontal response, pretty jagged, right? It's not like so that spinorama graph is kind of a summation of what's
Yeah,
going on here, right? And this is it's a flawed response for sure, but it's not all bad news. On axis is okay. There's that recess, but here's one thing. If you remember those directivity indexes, how there was that scoop in say 4 kilohertz, right?
yeah.
If you look now go back to that graph you just had on the. So look at the on-axis response in that range versus the off-axis response.
It looks filled.
Yeah, and so that's why this doesn't. That's a directivity error. And that's why you're going to have a hard time actually equalizing these, because if you boost that for the on-axis response, then you're way over boosting the off-axis response, and that's why this speaker would be hard to equalize.
Oh, okay.
And so I guess you can go to the other graph that shows a profile of this. It's pretty jagged off-axis. This doesn't have the best off-axis response. If you go to the next.
So would you say if you set up the speaker, you don't want a listener to sit more than 20 or 30 degrees off axis from it?
Yeah, I
Maybe
wouldn't. I would say I would be with
30.
maybe 15. Even 30 is gonna. See where the line where you have a solid on a vertical line. If you have solid rod, that's where you want to be in. That tells you what the angle you want to
Yeah,
stay in, and
let's see if we can zoom in on that. So you
that's
want to
about
be
30 maybe. Oh, or maybe
yeah,
20. Actually, not 30, but 20, right? 20
20
degrees.
plus or minus 20 degrees.
And so there's a lot going on here. I think one of the problems is the mid-range woofer size is considerably larger than that of the bass drivers, right? So there's a diameter mismatch that's hard to compensate for in the crossover.
Yeah.
Plus you've got the coaxial driver that's causing some craziness in say 4 kilohertz. I think the 4 kilohertz is like notchiness is because the coaxial driver is not. I think it's not 100% playing totally smoothly with the waveguide, and also the PPA lines might be doing something. It's kind of a strange response, but like I said, I don't think it sounded bad. It's not perfect, and maybe if you A/B this or compare this against something that did have a perfect response, you'd say, well, then the flaws would be audible, but on its own, it didn't sound terrible. It sounded pretty good.
Oh, by the way, I was just looking at the specs again because their website doesn't really show. You got to download their data sheet. The Founder 90C has bigger bass drivers than the LCR. It's got 7-inch drivers as opposed to 2 5.5s.
Okay, sure.
So it's possible because the bass drivers are bigger on the 90C, you'll see less of this problem, right? Some of these problems that you found.
Depending on the crossover points, it's you might have it wouldn't. I don't think it'd affect anything because the crossover point of those bass drivers is probably going to be like 600-700 hertz, and so like
Right.
on this graph you do see a little bit of that like MTM kind of interference, just a little bit, but it happens out of like I don't know about like
500 hertz is the
500
crossover.
to like say yeah it's not there's not much of it.
Yeah, so the crossover on the 90C is 500 hertz, and the crossover on the LCR is 700
700
hertz.
yeah, so there's a little bit of that lobing, but it's actually very controlled. It's not a problem at all. It's there, but it's not a problem.
Right.
On the I don't think it's going to be a problem with the 90Cs because the crossover is lower. Although the center to center spacing between the drivers will be off further, but since the crossover is lower, it's going to be fine. You know.
I just mentioned that because I know there's a dealer in Tampa that's one of the biggest Paradigm dealers, and he said that the 90 is just an incredible center channel, and he sells more of those than he does these 70 LCRs. So anyone considering the system, you might, if you're going to get the 100F towers, you might want to get the 90 center channel to go with that if you have the budget and the size
Sure.
to accommodate it.
Yeah, I mean, here's a
Why
so
is this in black and white?
I just wanted to make sure people knew it was different than the ones in blue because this is
Because
the measure.
you
This
turn the speaker vertical now, so it's standing up.
Yeah, so this means speaker is an LCR, which meaning you can use it as like upright or horizontally. And this is the upright response, the vertical response when it's turned upright. And like
Yep.
it's smoother. The
It does look
lobing.
better. It
You know
does
why?
look
Because
better.
the lobing. If you look at the low frequencies, right, that lobing is gone. The lobing is
Yes.
there, the MTM lobing. It's not bad, but it was there.
Yep.
And here it's gone. And also when you turn it vertically, right, when you lay it on its side, then you've stretched out the front baffle, right? And that
Yes.
means you have a lot more baffle diffraction, like horizontal baffle diffraction. When you turn it on its side upright, that baffle diffraction is gone. So you get some of that effects are gone in the higher frequencies. So this does look better, although it has some of the same flaws, right? I think that comes from like the waveguide and the just the size of the mid range, right? There's some coaxial problems. Some of the problems go away when you turn it upright, and so that's
Now, what do you think? There's they're talking about. We have a comment here. Room treatments can help tame off-axis high notes as well as improve sound. What do you recommend with room treatments with speakers like these?
For these, you might. It's not to tame the high notes. I don't think the high notes are a problem with this, or the high frequencies are a problem with this. It's just the sheer like irregularity of the off-axis response. So so for these, I would be looking to use absorption. That would target a broadband absorber, not just for high band. Like that would
Yeah, you
target
don't want
mid
to kill the
ranges
high.
and
Yeah.
lower treble. Not really. I don't care about like the high frequency like raggedness you see like above 10 kilohertz. That's directional anyway. It's not reflecting around the room.
Yeah.
So yeah, broadband absorbers is the answer to that. So you can go to the next one. It shows a profile view. See this is it's better behaved.
It looks a lot
upright.
better, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Still has the, like I said, the biggest problem I think is like that slope from say what is that, 1.5 to 2 kilohertz, is that there's kind of a slope there that ends in a kind of a larger Q or wider notch, right? And that's going to be a more determining sound characteristic of these speakers than those that like jaggedness, those really high Q notches. But it's better behaved overall is the story here,
Yeah. All right.
Here's the polar response for on when it's upright, and you can see it's a lot more regular. It's just better behaved. No baffle or less baffle diffraction. No lobing. Not that the woofer lobing was a problem before, but now it's just not there. And like, so it looks nicer on a graph, but I don't think it.
So the bottom line, guys, if you're building a Paradigm Founder Series system with 370 LCRs and you're going to put them behind a perf screen, use them vertically if you can. Put them in the vertical orientation.
I don't think that it's not going to sound a lot different. It looks better on a graph, but I don't think it'll sound different.
Yeah.
But if you can, yeah, use them vertically if you can. Sure. It would hide, but if you put them behind a screen, it would hide the nice looks of the speakers. These
Yeah,
speakers look beautiful.
these are really beautiful speakers again. So you did a ground plane bass measurement of this speaker, and this is like pretty textbook THX
Yeah,
crossover stuff here.
it's a sealed speaker. It starts falling off. Oh, I want to say like 90 hertz, right? And but the real need is basically 80 hertz, you know. And then since it's a sealed speaker, it rolls off on a at a 12 dB per octave slope, and like
Yep.
that's textbook, right? You can like we said before, these are speakers that you don't even need bass management for hardly, right? They bass manage themselves according to THX like prescription, right? So it's fine. This is exactly what you'd want from a central channel speaker for the low frequency response. So
Yep.
yeah, you can go to the next slide. There's not much to say about this aside from it's perfect. Oh,
Oh,
so that was, yeah. Oh, we've been talking for 70 minutes anyway. So
we've been
all right.
talking over an hour and 10 minutes. That's pretty, and I didn't cough that much. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope this is not too wearing on you to be yakking about the nitty gritty of speakers. You know, it's probably tiresome, you know, for some people. Oh, you know what I should have had while we're here. I have the 70 LCR on hand.
Oh, good.
This is
Good
not
30.
light. It's like
No, it's
40
about 30
pounds.
pounds or so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Let
heavy.
me,
These things are built for sure. It's you know, really nice, like uh I don't know. Oh, there's some dust on it, but we won't show that side too much. But there's the reflective side, right? Really nice, beautiful finish. That
I
midnight
like the
cherry.
shape of the cabinet. It's almost like a trapezoidal.
I don't think it is. Is it? I'm not
Oh,
sure.
it kind of looked like that from when you were
Does it look like? I think it's square, but I don't know.
side view of it.
Yeah.
Like it's tapered off in the back more.
Here's the binding posts if you want to see them.
So
There's
it's
there.
both of these speakers are biampable
Yeah, they're
and
biampable.
bi-wireable. Yeah. Doesn't
Most
make sense to biamp the center channel, but the tower, because of those 3.7s, heck, I would biamp those. I'd throw some power at those
Yeah,
woofers.
there's no sense in biamping two 5-inch or what are those 5 or 6-inch woofers, right?
Yeah.
But 3.7s could take the power if you have it on hand, and if you have no problem, if you have the amplifiers that you can biamp with, right? So yeah, a case can be made for the 100Fs, but don't biamp the sub LCRs. It's not worth
So what's the bottom line on how everything sounds? I know you have all the details in your subjective listening, but for people that don't like to read and
it.
they just sat through an hour and 12 minutes, you didn't really talk about, you said they
The
sound
sound,
strong.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it sounded everything sounded good. I don't know. I think for the 70 LCR, the 100F sound great. I listen to a lot of 2-channel music. Sounded really good, right?
You said they were holographic. They produced a holographic imaging.
Yeah, the imaging is really good. They're just really good speakers. While the measurements weren't 100% perfect for those, the measurements are very good and they sound terrific.
So what did you have recently that you listened to that you think that maybe they're better than or on the same level to? Because you've been testing a lot of speakers. I mean, are they per listen level or are they above the polk? Or, are they somewhere in the middle of the two? What would you say? Or are they all just like you're getting such good speakers now it's hard to discern?
I would have to A/B test them. I mean, to really answer that, actually, I did A/B test. I had these at the same time as the monolith. What are those budget monoliths? Those Encore speakers, the
Oh, the
T6s.
Encore, yeah.
We don't have a review on that. I did test them against the Encores, which are much less expensive.
A lot less expensive.
You know, I don't want to say. I did some actually A/B switching between them. I don't want to say how they compared until we actually review the Encore, until that
Yeah.
review is published, right? But I'm going to say these are really, really good speakers. And like they're beautiful. They sound great. They measure well. They're kind
Lots of output, lots of
output. Yeah,
headroom.
they're kind of expensive, but if you want some really nice looking speakers that have really good build quality and like sound great, like they're just good. I think they're.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest knock on the Premier series, and it's not really a knock because they're not expensive, is they don't have a fancy cabinet. They're pedestrian.
They're not bad.
They're not bad, but they don't have a finish like that.
Yeah, but you can't knock. Yeah, I know. Like you said, you can't knock the Premieres for that because they're not really expensive. These things are 5,000 pair, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you should expect a nice cabinet for that kind of scratch. But like,
I know it's been years since you've reviewed Persona, but would you? Because when I talked to Paradigm when they first announced the founders, excuse me, my voice is like giving out. They told me that the technology that's going into these speakers brings it really high up, very close to the Personas, and that there potentially could be a spin on the Personas going forward. Would you say that these get to that level of, because you had the Persona 5Fs, I believe?
yes, yeah, I had the 5Fs. Are they as good as 5Fs?
I mean, it's been 3 years, 4
Yeah,
years.
it's been too long. I couldn't tell you. I would have to like. I mean, I hate to be the guy who like, who wants to. If I said anything, how they might compare in terms of sound, it would just not. I wouldn't.
It's guessing.
Yeah, it would just be. I can't remember that well. I know the Personas sounded really really good.
Yeah.
These don't measure as well as the Personas. So I could only say that I think the Personas. I know the Personas can handle a ton of power too. They could handle
Yeah.
a ton of power, probably more than these, right? So if you want more dynamic range, for sure, get the Personas.
Although they're also more expensive too.
Oh yes, much more expensive. Yeah, I mean the 5Fs for like what 17,000. If they haven't raised the prices, back when I reviewed them, they were 17,000 a pair, and
Yeah.
that's obviously a lot more than 5,200. So like, I don't know. I think the Personas were better, but they
Well, I
should be.
hope so. I
They
mean,
should be.
still.
No, I don't know how much better because I can't. I just don't
Yeah,
remember.
there was 17 grand a pair when we reviewed them.
Everything's taken a price hike too, so they might be more now.
And those weighed 95 pounds a piece. So those must have been a bear to.
I didn't do the I didn't measure them like a normal. I
Oh, that's
couldn't.
right.
Yeah, I had to do inner measurements,
Yep.
and like they weren't as good as I normally. Those measurements weren't that as good as like how I normally measure speakers. So like I just tried to verify the curves that we got from Paradigm's own curves, which they have the largest anechoic chamber in North America, and they measured those on that in that room, and they sent me the graphs, and I just tried to verify that with some inner measurements, and I think I did pretty good with that. But all I
Yeah.
did is verify theirs. I didn't do the full thing like gamut that I normally do with those.
Well, the bottom line is Paradigm's been producing some incredible products. I mean, we've been from the subwoofers, what were those two subs that you reviewed? The Defiant or
The Defiant X, I did the Defiant X12, and the
and the
X15.
X15? Those are great subs. And then you got the the Persona. I mean, the Premieres are a great value and good performance.
Yeah, I mean they have some really great products. I mean, I really like if I could, I would just keep these speakers, right? I'm not going to, but like I think they're going to you. Is that right? These are
They
going
are
to you.
coming to me.
They're going to you. So you have some good speakers coming. So like
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be putting these up against the Premiere 800F side by side. I'll have Matthew come, and I'm gonna have him do the switching because I don't want to give into expectation bias. So I'll have him. Well, hopefully the sensitivity on him is pretty similar.
just use amps, use like outboard amps, and then have the amp
Yeah.
set so that the volume is the same.
And I don't want to like say that one's, I don't want to beat up on the Premiere 800Fs because I love those speakers. I just want to see how much more performance you're getting other than the cosmetics and it being able to play louder. I want to see if that translates. Because one thing I've noticed, and Anthony Gramani has kind of backed me up on this, is when you get a speaker that has a reasonably high sensitivity with a lot of like a lot of ability to play loud, they sound different than really low sensitivity speakers. They sound more natural because they're just more effortless. And I like speakers that have the dynamic range and they still have a good high sensitivity of at least 90 dB.
90 dB is nice, yeah. There's
Yeah.
advantages. I don't know. Like I know that's a thing. A lot of people, fans of high sensitivity speakers, will say that they're more resolving or something. Honestly, I don't think so. I
Not
don't agree with that.
the ridiculous giant horn things. I think you're compromising too many things with some of those designs to get the sensitivity. But generally speaking, I don't like small bookshelf speakers that are like 85 dB sensitive and you go and turn it up and they start bottoming out or they just
Sure. Well,
They
there's a
can't
time
play loud.
you can't use those on like a two channel system in a large room, obviously, right?
Yeah, you put
But
them
for a
on.
desktop system, they're just fine.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
It depends on the use, right? You don't want to use low sensitivity speakers on like situations that for very high output applications.
Yep.
Outside of that, though, I don't know that high sensitivity sound better. I know that some people think so. I don't. I think it depends on how you're using them.
I think that could be a topic for another video. We had Matt or Anthony involved, and somebody will present a slide presentation on their viewpoints, and then we'll have counter viewpoints. I don't know. I think that
We should get Matt on. I'm not. He would. I think he might argue for that, and I would love to like just sit here and like tell everyone how he's wrong.
yeah.
That would be a good live stream, I guess, for some people. Like what?
So in your listening test, you never heard any mechanical noises, no port chuffing, no woofer bottoming, no tweeter resonances. Everything was clean, no matter
Everything
what
was
level you
fine.
listened at.
I mean, maybe if I had really blasted them with like a really powerful amplifier, I might have been able to produce something like that. But my amp is only like I think 130 watts per channel.
Well, I've got the Anthem STR stack over here. It's I think I measured it at 600 watts at 4 ohms and 800 watts at 2 ohms for not continuous, but so these amps are pretty powerful. I've also got the Pascal amps in my theater room that are 1 kilowatt plus. So we'll be throwing some power at these speakers.
Well, I don't listen that loud, so I don't need like a kilowatt. I mean, for me, 100 watts is. I'm only like 8 feet from the speakers, so I don't. 100 watts is just fine for everything that I need, right? So, yeah, they're good enough for me, right? That's all I can tell you.
Well, I got to compensate for my hearing, man. I got to have it louder.
The louder you get,
nobody plays it louder than Don Dunn. Like I can't sit in a room when he wants to crank it up. It's like it's too much.
Yeah, these guys like really loud. I don't know, man. Above a certain point,
The thing I like about when I have him over though is he helps me find the breaking points of products because
he just cranks them so loud.
Yeah.
Okay.
I try to avoid that. I'm trying to protect whatever hearing I have left for another 20 years or so and to enjoy this stuff. And that's why I keep getting better equipment to compensate. But
you should get for when Don comes over, get those automotic hearing like plugs, that just reduce the whole like band of frequencies by like 20 dB. So like you can have a pleasant experience and he can blast as loud as he wants, and it's not gonna hurt your hearing too much. So have some Don hearing like protection.
That's what we need. We need Audioholics branded hearing protection.
And for your friends who like are just too. Matt likes it really loud too. Matt, I mean, I don't know.
Not as loud as Don.
Yeah, me and Matt have a friend here in Chicago likes it really loud, right? Like really on the occasions that we went to his home, I actually brought straight up hearing 30 dB hearing plugs.
Wow.
That's how loud. And I was like, it made it tolerable to be in his room. He really blasted it with subs and everything. Like it was fun, but a little bit too loud without those hearing plugs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So people are asking, competitor wise in this price range. I would say if you were looking at alternatives, Revel Beryllium series, the 226 BEs are probably around that same price.
They're a little bit more expensive. I know they incurred a price hike recently too, so they might be like 8,000. That might be more than these, considerably more. For these, what's a good? Maybe the Polk Legend L600s or the L800s. Those would be really good.
Different speaker though. That's the
the L800s are the ones. That's a very different speaker. Obviously, that has
very
a whole
different
thing going on. The L600s don't though, and I think those are like 4,000, a little bit more over 4,000 a pair. That's kind of close to these. Revell has their Performa 3 series, which is not the BE ones, but the ones without the beryllium tweeters. What else is that? There's some interesting looking speakers from Atlantic Technology that are about the same price, about 6,000 a pair. That are
the 9600s.
I think they're called the 8600s. I don't remember. They have like this kind of MTM. They have 2, 8, then like a 5, then a tweeter, then a 5. Then
those look killer, man. We gotta get those into you. I know they're probably heavy, but we got to get those in for you for review.
Yeah.
The bottom line, guys, is you're living in. I know everything sucks with the price hikes and the supply chain issues, but we're living in a great time of it's hard to get bad product. It's not impossible to get bad product, but reality is if you stick with some of these major brands and they have the research behind them, they have good driver design, they have good engineers there, you're getting better speakers today than you were getting 10 or 15 years ago, significantly better for less money. So it's an awesome time to be an audiophile.
Yeah, you don't have to like to get the same performance from a speaker made like 20 or 30 years ago, you'd be paying a lot more, and they wouldn't. Who knows if they'd how good they would really be, you know? So like,
Yeah.
it's yeah, you can still put together, even with all the shortages and supply issues, you can still put together a really clear system for not a lot of money, you know?
Yep.
So yeah, but these are not that inexpensive, I should say. These are kind of expensive. 5,000 a pair. Ooh, that's kind of expensive, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with more people staying home now, setting up home theaters, it's becoming more of a reality that people are putting more money into their houses now. So, anyways,
Your mic is muted. Are we still live? Because Gene went muted on
it's
me.
my computer every now and then just kicks me off of sound when I'm
Okay.
on. Yeah, I don't know why it does that. I think it's a conflict with Zoom. Anyways, guys, go to the audioholics.com homepage, look at the review. I put the link in the description below. Don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support as always. You get direct access to us if you want to ask questions or suggest video topics. James, thanks for all your hard work again. We're going to have you on soon because you've got more product reviews coming for us.
Sure. Yeah. Well, look forward to being back here.
All right, guys. Well, be safe. Avoid the COVID if you can. And until next time. Oh, before I go, on this Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we are having this legendary drummer as a guest. I've been waiting for years to interview him. His name is Gavin Harrison from Porcupine Tree. I want to give you guys a little preview to what we're going to the music, the musicianship of this guy, the technical ability of this guy. Can't wait to interview him. Here's a little clip I wanted to play for you guys. He's a surgeon. This guy is a surgeon. He's a surgeon of the drums. He's so precise. He's just very tasteful fills, very musical drummer. I'm excited to have him on. We're gonna have him with David Frangione on Thursday, 2 p.m. here. So please come to the channel, check it out, ask your questions. Porcupine Tree is coming back with a new album. They're going to be touring the US this year. I think they're going to be announcing tour dates this year. I'm going to do my best to go see them. I love the band. I've been following them since I was in college. I'm glad to see that they're back. That's a wrap. And until next time, my friends,